Hi there. Welcome to season 12 of the Village Square's God Squad series. I'm Christine White, Executive Director of the Tallahassee Village Square, and we are delighted to kick off the new season with this unique and special tribute to the late, great Coach Bobby Bowden and several of his star football championship players who've gone on to do all sorts of wonderful things with their own lives. I wanted to remind you that today you will only be able to see and hear our panelists, so feel free to get comfy, sit back and relax, enjoy your lunch, whatever you'd like. And we do encourage you to ask questions using the Zoom Q&A tools. You can type your questions in there, the sooner the better, and we'll do our best to get to as many of them as we possibly can as time allows. And I invite you to join us for our next God Squad program on Friday, December 10th. That will also be at noon via Zoom. And you can learn more and get registered at tlh.villagesquare.us. And we are excited to resume our in-person programming coming in January. So we hope our locals will join us for those as well. Finally, I want to give a big special thank you to all of our Village Square members and donors, whether you're with us or just in spirit today, because your financial support does help this nonprofit organization continue to provide free programs just like this one today, going on 15 years now, believe it or not. And we are working hard to build bridges and human empathy in our community and also narrow the partisan divide. So you can learn more about membership and the perks that come with it on our Village Square website. So without further ado, I hope you will join me in welcoming Father Tim Holeda of St. Thomas More Co-Cathedral here in Tallahassee, Florida, and longtime member and beloved member of our God Squad, who is so graciously moderating today's program for us. So take it away, Father Tim.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you to all who are joining us today. I'm excited to do this program. I was really excited to get asked to do it. I've been a lifelong fan of the Florida State Seminoles, loved Bobby Bowden growing up, and I'm excited because I remember I was 12 years old watching some of these players play in 1993 in the national championship year, and then in my first year as a Florida State student. I was here in 1999, so I was here for that great season as well. We have two players from that team as well. So I want to introduce them. First off, I'm Father Tim Holeda. I'm a priest at the Co-Cathedral of St. Thomas More, right across from campus. I've been here for several years now. And I think we're going to introduce our players, and they're going to come on here. We have Ryan Sprague, who was on the 1999 football team, was a tight end. We have Nick Maddox, who will be joining us later. He's having some connectivity issues, but maybe we'll wait for him to pop up here. Dan Campbell, who was on the 1993 football team, an offensive guard, and Charlie Ward, Heisman Trophy winner, also quarterback on the 1993 team. Could you guys, let's start with Charlie Ward. Would you introduce yourself and tell us the years you played and what you're doing now?
As you mentioned, I am Charlie Ward, and I played for Coach Bowden from 89 to 93, graduated in 93. And I'm currently the head boys basketball coach at Florida High, AKA FSUS, and I also do some public speaking.
All right, thank you. Dan?
My name is Dan Campbell. Excited to be here. I played at FSU from 1991 to 1995. So my last game would have been the 96 Orange Bowl. The last Orange Bowl actually played in that stadium, which is kind of cool. Stayed in Tallahassee. My wife now was a year behind me in school, and so motivation to not leave Tallahassee, so I've been here ever since. We own Wash Around the Clock, which is a local chain of laundromats. We have commercial laundry and pickup and delivery, kind of a little bit everything laundry related. And just love Tallahassee. We've got 3 great kids that we've been able to raise here, and just excited to be here.
Thanks, Dan. Ryan?
Yep, and I'm Ryan Sprague. I'm from Augusta, Georgia, hence the Jock Peterson Pearls. Go Braves tonight. And I came to Florida State in 1996 as a walk-on. I was on the team from 1996 through 2000. I too found a local girl, ended up marrying a Tallahassee girl, Lincoln High School alum, and we've been in Tallahassee for a long time now. I I got 6 kids that keep us pretty busy, keep us running around all the different Tallahassee activities. And I worked in pastoral ministry in different churches in Minnesota and North Carolina and Tallahassee. And now I'm at a Christian crisis pregnancy center. We're working with young women and young men who have babies on the way and are a little bit overwhelmed by their circumstances and need help with parenting or need help with different resources. And we try to help take care of them and help them thrive in their family situations.
It's awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being here and joining us on this panel to talk about Coach Bowden and his faith. So if you could just kind of share briefly, and we can just sort of, I'm not calling you, you can raise your hand or just start talking. In what ways, I mean, as a player, as a young man joining the team, I mean, what ways did you see Bobby Bowden's faith? How did you see it in action? Can you just tell us a little bit about that? I mean, we hear a lot about it in the news. I know he spoke a lot about it. But what, as a player on the inside, what can you tell us about his faith and how it affected him and his coaching? And
Well, I guess I'll start. He was, I think one of the things that was great about Coach was he was bold in his faith. He really didn't mind letting people know who he served and who was in control of his life. And so that was something that really stood out about him. And, he shared it, he lived it through his coaches. Then, of course, us have an opportunity to see it in action by, essentially saying, this is what we're going to do. I mean, going to church, taking the team to church 2 times during the course of preseason, really spoke volumes. I know to myself, growing up in a Christian household, it spoke volumes to, he just believed in what he believed in, and he was going to stand up to it. And I'm sure in this day and age, that may be different, doing that type of, having that type of boldness due to all the scrutiny. But during that time, he thought that was best to be able to help his kids, see who Jesus was by taking them to church. He didn't force it on guys to go, but we felt like as a unit, it would be very good. And then, he was just giving us opportunities to find a church if that's what we wanted to do. So I just thought it was his boldness spoke volumes of, his boldness for Jesus Christ spoke volumes through the way he lived his life.
that's awesome. Dan, you said something similar. Yeah.
Yeah, the same thing, Charlie. For me, coming in as a freshman and the first week of camp, getting up and going to mass on Sunday as a team or church on Sunday as a team, for 2 weeks in a row, it was so impactful. I came in like you from a Christian household. I was pretty involved with my church in Jacksonville growing up through high school. And it was great to feel a sense of we want of encouragement for that faith when you became a college student. Because I think a lot of kids come to college and say, hey, this is the years I'm going to, I'll leave my faith at the doorstep a little bit and go have some fun in college. Well, you get there and here's Coach Bowden, who, already in '91 when I get there is a legend. And, he's saying the exact opposite. He's saying, hey, young man, it's all great what we do on the field, but if you're not doing it for the glory of Jesus, it's all for nothing. And he lived that. That wasn't when the microphone was on. He talked to everybody that he met, knew where he stood in his faith and what his priorities were. And I really do believe his priorities were, trying to bring as many young men closer to Jesus through his coaching ability. And he did that not only personally, but through the men that the team as well. Whether it's Coach Van or Cliff or Clint bringing people to FCA, Coach Rick, who had a big conversion. I think Charlie could probably share that story better than me. He surrounded himself with other great godly men that had such a positive influence on the lives of so many guys that came through in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. It was refreshing.
And I would, I didn't come to school as a Christian. My family, my household, we were my mom and dad were both raised, I guess you'd say, in the church to various different degrees. And as my family, I was this fifth child out of six. My parents were pretty steady in their church involvement as my older sisters grew up, but kind of got a little disconnected from it. And so for me, church wasn't unfamiliar to me, but I didn't have a faith that was my own. And so when I got to school, seeing Coach Bowden's faith and seeing the way he went was new to me. I mean, I was introduced to Christian music at Florida State by Clint Purvis, handing out CDs. You guys ought to check out these guys and listen to this. And so a lot of it was new to me. So what I'm going to share now is more looking back on what I observe from it now through a 43-year-old's eyes as opposed to then. But I would say on two fronts. One, it was by the time I was there, 96 or 2000, Coach Bowden was very much in that role of letting his coordinators and his coaches do the gross majority of what happened with the students on the field. He was up in his tower, he was overseeing, he was coaching coaches, we interacted with coaches. And so I was a beneficiary of his like indirect influence in the culture that he created, because Coach Rick and Coach Lilly, who was my direct coach, and Coach Van Hallander had as much of an influence on my life as anybody in college, all three of them being men of faith and all three of them trying to help me orient my life to the way that God would have me live. And so they were the ones that most were directly impactful on my life, as Coach Bowden created a culture that allowed them to be able to do that freely. And the other part that I would say was he was just authentic. You know, he, as much as he believed that, you know, giving the ball to the fullback would be a great play for establishing the run and helping you win a game, or his little sayings that he'd say, you know, the seniors won't let us lose, or we go into a game at halftime with a lead and he'd say, hey, if they don't score, we win. I mean, those little things that were so much of his like vernacular as a football coach, we believed because he's lived it out, right? We saw him be successful. We knew what he's capable of. And he was much the same way with his faith. You know, every Friday night before a game, when he would speak to the team, he'd talk football with us. Here's the 7 things we're going to do this Saturday. And if we do them, we will win. Now that we're done with that, let me tell you about what's really important in life. This is who God is. This is who Jesus is. And I hope you guys would get to know him. Like, it was never pushy. It was persistent. Like, he was faithful and always making sure we understood what was valuable to him. But it was never pushy because it just was him. It was Coach Bowden being Coach Bowden. If you didn't want to believe it, that's fine. If you didn't want to follow him that way, that was fine. But that was just Coach Bowden. And I think that authenticity in him, that it was not putting on a show, that it was not trying to even persuade us. He just wanted to make sure we were aware. And I think that patience in him, that humility in him was winsome. And my faith in the Lord right now, I would say is absolutely attributed to the example that he set and him putting coaches in a position to be able to do that too.
That's fantastic. Well, and it's amazing to hear this. It doesn't, at least the impression I get is that this is not something that's very common right now. I don't mean just our program in particular, but just around the country, just don't hear about something like that. And I wonder, I think a lot of times, I wonder if there's coaches out there who have a strong faith, and players who have a strong faith, and this plays a huge role in their life, but maybe there's a little more pressure to not share that. Is there a little bit of an opposition? So I wonder, did you guys ever experience that there? I mean, there had to have been players that did not come from a faith background, as you said, Ryan, or players who were Jewish or not Christian. What was that like? Was there any kind of opposition ever to any of this, or were they ever felt isolated? I mean, what was that sort of culture like as a result of this sort of a more explicit expression of faith from a coach?
Well, I don't know how much this was coach being so forward. And I didn't get recruited, right? So I was a walk-on. My experience was a little different than Charlie and Dan's as far as their exposure to Coach Bowden when they were in high school. My assumption is he was as authentic in the recruiting process as he was in the coaching process. So I'd imagine any mom or dad or kid who sent their kid to Coach Bowden understood they're going to be sending him to a very devout and evangelical believer. And so I would think they would kind of be prepared for that. So, and then when I was at school, a lot of the guys that I ran around with shared the same values as Coach Bowden. So I didn't experience it in my interaction with other teammates, any kind of friction or any kind of people being frustrated about Coach Bowden. I mean, we had some guys that like to do, as Dan said, they like to have the college fun, if you will. And they might've been a little perturbed or might've found it, they might roll their eyes or be irritated that we would dedicate time to some of that stuff, but not to the point of being, I guess, offended. I mean, they just would kind of find it annoying to them. So Charlie or Dan might have had a different experience, but from my experience, I didn't have anybody around me that vocalized any kind of frustration.
Well, we really didn't have anyone, maybe one guy, I do believe, and I think he was Muslim. But I think Coach Bowden was very forward with all the parents on who he was and what he was about. And, I think when it's all said and done, even the guys who didn't believe at the time what Coach may have been saying, he was dropping seeds. I mean, that's what God calls us to do, plant seeds. And at some point in our lives, someone else may come and water it, and then God's going to give the increase. And so I think Coach Bowden was doing what he was called to do, and giving us opportunities to hear the word of God. As you heard Dan and Ryan mention, Clint Purvis was very instrumental, and Coach Van Hallinger. They were all instrumental in, FCA. That was an option for players to be able to go and learn and be around other Christians and grow as well. And of course, most of our position coaches were Christians as well, because every coaches meeting they had a devotional in some form or fashion. And so the majority of the coaches were Christian. And I know before our meetings, our quarterback meetings, we had a devote that we read from the Daily Bread. I'm sure many of y'all may know that's a throwback from the past. But we had Daily Bread devotionals each and every meeting. And so those were seeds that were planted in our lives. And even if we weren't living according to the word of God and what God was calling us to do, it was definitely something that was on our brain to make us think about the way we were living our lives. And so I just think that's something, as we continue to move forward in this day and age, we can't allow, the surroundings to hide our faith, because you may come under scrutiny. You may get the heat, as I call it, because you may be different or I wouldn't say pushy, but planting seeds. But I just think it's important, because at some point in time, when I look back, and I'm sure we all kind of look back and see all the seeds that were planted throughout our time in college and how it has made us as young men now, and fathers and also leaders, we see the importance of doing it, because you never know when and how that's going to manifest itself over the course of time.
Yeah, and I can piggyback on that. I mean, I think that the guys that I was closest to at FSU, whether they were believers or not believers, everybody was included. Everybody felt. I've never seen anybody get pressured into anything regarding their faith. I think the Coach Bowden, the way he led and the way he asked his coaches to lead was, it's our job to let these young men know that there's a better path, that there's a way. But I can't think of any players that I played with. I mean, I think I could tell by maybe what they did when they weren't at practice and when they weren't at the dorms, that maybe they weren't paying attention. But at no time did I ever feel any of them say they were uncomfortable or they felt pressured in any way. And I think that's one of the things. I think Brian mentioned how genuine Coach Bowden's faith delivery was. And I think that's a big testament to it, because it would have been easy to complain, and they didn't.
I would add too, there's something to be said about a sense of humor and that charm. But like Coach Van Hallinger, if you guys don't know, he was the strength and conditioning coach, I think, for all of us. And he also was the director, the leader for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And then Clint Purvis, who's been the chaplain for who knows how long. Coach Van and Clint and Coach Bowden are not afraid of sarcasm and are not afraid to have fun with it. So there's many times I'd be out stretching before a practice and I would get some sort of kind of backhanded compliment from Coach Van Hallinger that would be followed up with, "Hey, need to see you at FCA Tuesday night." And then he'd go about, right? Everything else would continue on. But there's just the constant, I like Charlie mentioned the idea of options. I think that's what it was. It was just an option. Like Coach Van Hallinger or Coach Bowden would be coaching us, football perspective, no matter where we were, walk on, scholarship guy, starter, second string, Christian or not a Christian, we're all getting taught where to put our hands and what to do with our feet or how to lift a weight equally. Everyone had the same opportunity to become better as a football player, but you would also have this option of, if you wanted to explore spiritual growth and spiritual development, these guys are here. This guy will teach you how to lift a weight. This guy over here, Clint, he'll teach you about the Bible. And here's just an option. So I think that approach of just making it available to guys if they wanted it, added to again that invitation sense and that welcome sense without it feeling pushy. And again, they had a sense of humor about it. They weren't afraid to mess with you a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it's important to hear that, because I do think there's sort of a prevailing perhaps like a fear of, am I going to upset somebody or offend them, or am I trampling on their rights or something along those lines if I have a prayer in this circumstance. I was actually just at a prayer breakfast not too long ago that was attended by a lot of different people, and I asked the guy running it, I said, well, I'm a Catholic priest. Can I do a Catholic prayer? Can I pray? Am I going to offend you? How do you feel about this? Because I wanted to pray the way I wanted to pray, but I was trying to be sensitive to that too. And he said, hey, I think they know what to expect from you. You know what you're going to say. They're going to be shocked that you believe in Jesus, So I think it's important to hear this because I think today we're kind of afraid to express our faith. And I think there's also an assumption out there that when somebody does do something like this, say, hey, we're going to go to church, or we're going to offer this, we're going to have these options, that there is some sort of proselytization or force or pressure. And that's not necessarily the case. And from what you gentlemen are telling me, and what your experience was personally on the team, was that wasn't the case, that people, it was very comfortable. It was an option. There was a lot of freedom. No one was offended. And I think that's important. One thing I'd like to bring up too is, you said this, that football, it was important, but faith came first. I think he expressed that all the time. I think his motto is like faith, family, and football. And the fact that he would go to church, and he would put that as a priority, is very different than I think what I experienced, at least on the periphery of what it seems like college football can become, or what sports is becoming. It's more important often. It takes the place of church. It takes the place of faith. I've just seen this as a parish priest where someone's unable to attend certain classes or participate in certain things. I've seen volleyball tournaments take place on Easter weekend, where families that I know are struggling to try to find an opportunity to go to service on Easter Sunday. And just, it seems like there's this sort of shifting that's happening here. And it's an amazing witness that this man, who was not the coach of a small school somewhere, but the coach of, one of the, I think the greatest, college football program ever, I'm a little biased, would actually say, no, football isn't first. And placing God first, I think, is an important thing. Unfortunately, so over the years as a priest, 10 years now, I've seen a lot of players at Mass. I've seen players on Sunday, but in the last few years I haven't, because they changed their policy where now they have practices on Sunday. And so the players are unable to make it. One of my parishioners was an assistant coach, and then suddenly I stopped seeing him at Mass, and he said, I can't, we have practices, we're busy all day now. So I think, have you kind of seen that? I mean, maybe, I know Coach Ward, you're still involved in coaching. I mean, is this a culture that's sort of pervasive now? It seems that football or sports in general are kind of taking the place of these things. They're becoming more important for some families in the United States.
I wouldn't say it's becoming more important. As we all know, there's a will, there's a way. And I do believe, I'm not sure what time Mass is or what church is. There are different times that people can go to church. And so I know on Sundays, if there's an opportunity, they can come earlier, because church don't always start at the time that they're practicing, which normally I think on Sundays is in the afternoons. And so I just think where there's a will, there's a way, and there's always other measures as well. To be able to, get your gathering and with the people at the church. And I don't know if, it's a new season of life or whatever the case may be. I do believe that, they have options at the facility, that they can go to be able to get what they need from a spiritual standpoint. And so if they aren't able to make it to Mass or the church on a Sunday, they will probably have, church for them at some point in time where they can go and get a message and gather with other Christians. And so, but I don't think they're replaced, or giving football more over their faith in per se than them making it a priority to find a way to make it work. Because there are a lot of programs out there with Christian coaches, and one being who we're playing this weekend, Clemson. Coach Dabo Sweeney is also a Christian man of faith, and he doesn't hide it either. Very similar to Coach Bowden, and he's gotten criticized and thrown on the bus, from all the outsiders that don't have the same faith and believe that, he shouldn't be sharing his faith. I think that's been something that we should tackle more than, trying to find a way to say that we can't make it to church or what have you, because the outside, as we all know, there's an opponent. The opponent as a Christian is Satan, and he'll find ways to try to eliminate your witness in some form or fashion. But we have to remain true, and we also have to encourage one another, because when you feel like you're out there on your own and you're alone, it's not very good. But when you have a lot of people encouraging you in your faith to continue to move forward, because it is making a difference in the young man and the people that's listening, I think that's huge as well. So I just think where there's a will, there's a way. And I don't think that there may be some programs that have done that because they're practicing on Sundays, but I don't think that's they've replaced their faith, football over faith.
Yeah, I would add something to that too. I would bet to the Catholic or to the high church sacramental Christian, it would be felt more acutely than to the non-denominational evangelical, as to like, what are the essentials of the corporate worship experience, right? So as you guys know, the Eucharist is essential. Like that's going to be present in the Mass. You move into a Baptist context or non-denominational, it's the proclamation of the word that is the elevated thing. So I know, like at Florida State, Sunday mornings they have a worship service. There's a guy, Reggie Hutchins, who's a pastor at Unity Baptist Church in town and involved with FCA. He and Clint, I don't know if they alternate or what it is, but they come and he will preach. I mean, there's a chance for them to come together as a group of teammates and hear the word of God proclaimed, coaches and families together. So to speak to what Charlie was saying, it being incorporated into their daily experience, where they've carved out time for these guys, but they still are putting them on a high priority. And I think that has a lot to do with just a lot of these coaches are, I don't want to say micromanagers, but they want to know where these kids are all the time, because they know a lot of these kids have people that are out to get them. A lot of these kids might be prone to getting in trouble. They've gone from a place of very little structure to now they're trying to create structure. And so I remember Dabo Sweeney mentioned it, like he said to somebody in an interview, like, I can tell you where my kids are going to be August 17th next year at 4:00 in the afternoon. Like that kind of super meticulous thinking. And Norvell's similar. So I'm, piggybacking on what Charlie said, they have carved out time for these athletes to do that if they want to. But again, going back to my initial point, as more of a sacramental oriented kind of a worshiper, I think they would feel it more. Because I don't know of a church where they might be inviting a priest in to offer a Eucharist on a Sunday morning. I'd be curious to hear from the Catholic kids or the Anglican kids or Lutheran kids if they feel it differently than a non-denominational or a Baptist kid might.
That makes sense. Yeah. Dan, did you have anything to add to that?
I mean, as far as how it is now, the only thing that comes to mind, because I think Charlie and Ryan said it best, is I just can't imagine if Coach Bowden were coaching today that he would approach it any differently. Obviously the social media and the stuff that's so different that we didn't have back then, thank God, was, it alleviated a lot of the things. But what I loved about my experience with Coach Bowden, because I was very involved at the Catholic Student Union at FSU there where Father Tim is that my faith was encouraged. I mean, that we had Wednesday nights, we had other things, and the coach staff encouraged those opportunities. Especially if they knew you were pursuing it, they wanted you. And they didn't care if it was Baptist or if it was Catholic or if it was non-denominational or Protestant, whatever it was. If you're getting called to it, please go. We'll figure out a way to make it work. And I I would like to think that if a player had the faith and the commitment to go talk to their coaching staff today, whether it was Norvell, and I'm sure Dabo, and really just about any other of these coaches, Nick Saban as well, they would figure out a way to make it happen. I just want to believe that. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to encourage the audience to submit any questions in the Q&A box if they have any questions for our former players that are here today. One kind of lighthearted question someone did submit already. When things go wrong, do any of you guys now say "dadgummit"?
All the time, daily.
Really?
But I'm on my best behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. There's quite a few old phrases from the different coaches that have become part of my parenting life or part of my life. Coach Amato used to always say the pen never forgets, because he would just keep a book all year long of all the different things we did wrong. And then at the one time a year when it came time to pay the piper, he'd start bringing out the book, back in March, you were late or whatever. And he would also say abuse leads to restriction, which I found worked its way into my parenting life a little bit. But yeah, I'm a big proponent of the dadgummit. I say it on the regular.
Coach Ward, no? Do you use that word?
I'm not necessarily dadgummit.
Okay.
I mean, I don't curse. But I find myself using a lot of my dad's words, because a lot of my coaching and parenting, of course, came from my parents. So I find myself very similar to what my dad said, or I sound just like him in a lot of ways. But of course, I have some mannerisms from Coach Bowden. But it's funny though how now as a coach, you talk to the players, and they have the same memories as we have of our coaches. Like the thing that like Ryan just mentioned about Coach Amato, some of the sayings that they have and the mannerisms, and so it's just curious to see how leaders plant seeds in those that are following them, and some of the things that we've learned, we're sharing with others. And I'm sure it'll be the same way when we're grandparents, or our kids are grown. You will start to hear some of those same isms from our kids and players.
I wanted to ask you all three real quick. I mean, I think there's sort of something that I think I kind of was surprised by. Several years ago, when I was at Blessed Sacrament Catholic Church in town, we had our youth group, and we had some kind of connection. We were able to get a few players to come over, and I was so impressed with these guys and how kind they were, and just great with these young people that we had in our youth group. And I guess it just sort of, I just assumed wrongly that they were like, I don't know, kind of wild and crazy, or kind of arrogant, or I just kind of assumed, I mean, they're on this great football team, that they would just have I was just very taken aback by that. It was really a shock in some ways. And I would talk about it often. I'd say these guys, they were really, really kind and very good and humble. I was very impressed by that. And I wonder if that some of that I have to imagine has something to do with this culture that was created by the coaching staff there. And I mean, how do you, looking back, do you see can you describe that culture that you experienced there at FSU as a player? And I know there are some kind of popular myths, perhaps, right, that our players are a bunch of criminals or something like that. But at least that was never my experience interacting with players the few times I've had a chance to. Could you guys comment on that a little bit?
Well, Father Tim,
I think that comment.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Charlie.
You go ahead.
No, go ahead. Well, I was going to say the criminal thing, that's just the University of Florida, University of Miami. Florida State always just recruits the Saints.
Right.
No, go ahead, Charlie.
No, I mean, it's always, it's no different any other place. I mean, you're going to have those that we, quote unquote, feel like, are very kind and warming, respectable. And then you're going to have those that are what you mentioned. And sometimes it's not so much, the individuals, their upbringing or their background, where they came from. And then there's some that eventually over the course of time, if they're in an environment or culture that can change their thinking or their hearts change for God and they see light in a different way, then you can start to see the manifestation of, the Spirit living through them. So, we're no different. I keep saying, sports is a microcosm of the entire world. And so you're going to have all different types of people, different thought processes. And the good thing about sports is it brings us all onto one goal, one common goal, which is to win. And then sometimes you have those that, go against winning with their attitudes, the way they live their lives, the way they prepare. And it's no different than any other aspect. But I'm glad you were able to get some of the good guys to come over to share so that they can, show that there is a possibility or a culture that's being shared on the team.
Yeah, and I'd echo that. And I would say the majority of the guys are pretty good guys. But I'd also say there's some pragmatism in it. If you make a request, they're not going to send you the guys that are going to act the fool. They're going to send you the kids that represent the university well. So there's a little bit of that too. And they're assessing these kids, right? They get an 18-year-old kid, and whatever his life situation comes from, they've got him for 4 years, and they're going to invest in them beyond just their athletics development. They're trying to speak into all that. So they'll give them experiences. But from Coach Bowden, my experience there, I would think you mentioned the idea of we were good football teams and that this possibility of there being arrogance. I would think at that program, Coach Bowden had incredibly high expectations, and you're expected to do what you're expected to do, and you're expected to do it the same way every time, unless you're getting better. And if you're not living up to that standard, you'd be held accountable because the next guy will do it. And so there was this combination of like high expectations with a humble view of yourself that, even a Peter Warwick, like in my experience, might have to be replaced. Arguably the best college football player over the span of 3 or 4 years, and he had to be replaced, and people had to step up and play. So that culture, again, high expectations, humble view of self, I think came from Coach Bowden's understanding of the faith. I think he thinks God expects something of us. We're supposed to live in a way that glorifies him and represents him to a watching world. And part of that, though, is understanding that we need to be incredibly humble. He's the one who created us. He's the one who empowers us to live. And that is all coming out of an understanding of our devotion and love for him. So I would think he would hope that that's the stuff that you're observing when his players are out in the public light or his coaches are out there. Again, high expectations, live the best way you can, but do it in a humble way.
We have a question from the audience. What is the one thing Bobby said or did that most influenced your life journey?
Well, I know for me, I don't know if there's one thing. There was a lot of things that he did and said. But one was, when I was being recruited, one of the reasons why I chose Florida State was because of Coach Bowden and him being a man of God. And, while I was being recruited, he told me that if I wanted to play quarterback, that I was going to have to be patient and wait my time. And that was true. There's not going to be, unless there were, guys getting injured, for me to have an opportunity early to play. But otherwise, I was going to have to wait my time. And so, that was fair, and he was honest. But he was also honest about me having an opportunity to play basketball if I did my part. And he allowed me to go and play basketball my second year in college. I was fully on scholarship for football, but he was a man of his word, and he allowed me to go and play basketball full time my second year in college, which I don't think another football coach would do that. But he had promised that he would allow me to do it, and I was grateful for it. When I look back over my career, definitely grateful for his heart for God, and also just being a man of his word.
I would again remember my context was a little bit more indirect with Coach Bowden, just the season of life where he was. So to me, the position coaches, Coach Rick and Coach Lilly and them, they were closer in stages of life to me than Coach Bowden was. So when I'm watching Coach Bowden with his sons, right, his son is my wide receiver coach, right? He's a grown man married on his own life. Whereas watching Coach Rick with his son, so to me, the most vivid memory I have from my experience at Florida State as it pertains to things that shape me would be it's watching Coach Rick with his kids and the capacity that Coach Andrews, I also noticed it acutely, his shift from football coach guy, just incredibly hard on us, driving. I don't even know if this guy likes me at all, to when his wife would show up and it was like family night. Oh, I forget what night it was, Thursday night maybe. And all of a sudden you see this gentlemanly man who is kind to you and he is servant minded towards his wife. And again, Coach Rick, watching him shift from being coach guy, like be driving, yelling, screaming, do your best, that kind of thing. And understanding high profile, we're competing for a national championship every single year that I was there. Every game we played had everything riding on it. And that last whistle blows and he's out there rolling around with his son wearing a Superman cape, just playing and wrestling and watching that. I mean, to me, those images burned in my mind of the idea of being able to prioritize their families and make focused time on those kids and the next generation. That was to me, but again, I think that's part of the culture Coach Bowden created. And if you guys have ever heard the book, Tony Dungy's got a book, Quiet Strength. And he talks about that same kind of thing, observing what it's like working with Coach Knoll and what he tried to create. And he makes the point that is not what you get to see everywhere. I mean, it really was what we experienced at Florida State different than what you might see. It was unique. Coach Van Hallinger, I think, used the word that it was almost like perfection, not perfection, but it was a very unique experience, what we saw at Florida State when trying to discourage me from being a coach. Like, that is not what you'll find everywhere you go. You're not going to always see kids on the field. You're not going to see family nights. You're not going to see church being a part of the summer experience. And so, again, to me, indirectly, the culture Coach Bowden created, I was able to observe a guy like Coach Rick be a parent to his 5-year-old boy. And that burned in my mind as something that I wanted to make sure I prioritized whenever I hit that season in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think for me, the two things about Coach Bowden, Charlie mentioned, he was sometimes brutally honest with people, and he would always tell you, whether you wanted to hear it or not, what you needed to hear based on what his mission for you as a player, as a young man, as a future father and husband, he would tell you. And if he saw an issue, he would tell you. And then the second side of that is the genuineness of his faith. Again, he didn't just turn it on when the microphone clicked on. If you were to walk upon him, if you just walked into his office, maybe Sue wasn't at the desk, he was probably reading his Bible, or he was probably looking over some, but it was genuine. It wasn't just, hey, look at me, I'm Coach Bowden, I'm a man of faith. That was who he was. That was his discipleship, was that, he never wanted to miss an opportunity to give somebody the hope of Jesus, no matter what the context. And he would always find a way to work it in. And I think because Ryan, even back when the old guys here played, it was similar. Coach Bowden really coached the coaches. I think that generation of coaching was very similar to that. I mean, it's a whole lot different now. But I think now as a 48-year-old with 3 kids, 2 of which are fully grown, still in college, I look back and I think the thing that Coach Bowden led by example that I want to emulate the most was his ability to be a loving husband and a loving father to his kids, even in the midst of having a career that challenges those things greatly. I think his example of his marriage and his children and his impact in their lives, I think is the thing that I look to emulate in my life most, because I think all the other blessings that come out of that sort of just free flow from that. So that would be my answer to that question.
We're kind of getting low on time. We're getting close to our end. I wanted some of the types of a question that would actually be probably provoke a lot of discussion, but we don't have as much time. So I'll break it down for you. This person asked, do you think Bowden's faith helped FSU succeed? And if it did, how do you explain the success of some non-religious coaches and the failure of some Christian coaches? I think obviously by succeed, they mean simply winning. But I would break it down. I often hear this as a priest, or whenever, I'm sure you've all heard this before, when you see players praying or athletes giving credit to God or coaches giving credit to God. They'll say, come on, what is God doesn't care about sports, or God doesn't care about who wins or loses, and like why does it matter to pray, and so on, when it concerning sporting events. And I'll tell you my answer to that. I'd be curious real quick what you guys would say in response to that. Does God care about who wins a sports game?
Yeah,
God cares about his people.
Yep.
And I think a lot of times when we start talking about, God doesn't care about sports, where he cares about his people. And our ultimate goal in life is to glorify him in all things. And so whether it's genuine or not, that's not our place. That's judgmental. If we're sitting there judging someone's, speech on whether they're genuine or not, that's not our place. But we're grateful for Coach Bowden and his culture that he built around his faith. Because just like when you go to church, Jesus came to heal the sick. He didn't come for the people who were well. He came to heal the sick. And so I think that whole mantra of, wins and losses, I heard that, when I was playing in the NBA, that this whole deal about, wins and God doesn't care, both teams are praying. I agree, but health-wise, we want God to cover us. Regardless of who wins or loses, we want to come out healthy. And if we're not coming out healthy, we want to be healed. And so I just think, that's something that people like to throw out as a distraction. But when it's all said and done, it's about glorifying God in all things. And if I can show Tim Tebow being on the knee, praying before a game, and then he lives it out as well, that's like a double glorification in a lot of ways. And so I don't see it, Coach Bowden, any other person who decides to share their faith at any given moment as any different than someone who's going to work, wanting their business to succeed, be successful, and be founded on principles that we know are solid from the Word of God, that's going to help us be successful. If I can have someone who's living the fruits of the Spirit in my business or on my team, I know what kind of foundation we have. And whether we win or lose the game, at some point in time, God's going to honor our hearts. And if our hearts are in the right spot, we'll see the fruits of our labor.
Yep. And I would, God causes the rain to fall on the just and on the unjust, right? I think Charlie makes a good point that it's about humans and about the human's relationship with God ultimately. But I do think that it just depends on how you view the beginning of that question, right? Does God care if Florida State wins national championship? Well, let's take it back. Does God care whether or not you eat dinner tonight? Does God care whether or not your kid does well in school? Does God care whether or not you get the house you wanted? I think all have some way that we apply that same prayer of God help me win the game. But you're saying there's something that you want in your life and you're asking God to bless you with that thing. And I think God invites that kind of request to ask of him these things. But at the same time, balancing that with your understanding of the sovereignty of God, that just because you want a thing doesn't mean God is obligated to give you that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And how God answers that prayer is not a reflection of his character. If you don't get it, that doesn't mean he's evil. And if you do get it, that doesn't mean he's good. That is static, right? We know that to be true. So yeah, I always push back on that prayer too, because I think we're too narrowing our focus on a question because we think sports are trivial. But look at what happens at Florida State when we're doing well. Hotel owners, restaurant owners, real estate agents, teachers, everybody is doing a little bit better. And when the team's struggling, everybody's doing a little bit worse. So to say that God doesn't care about a win or a loss would effectively say God doesn't care about the livelihood of any of the families that are affected by that particular thing. So yeah, I think it's too narrow of a question. And I think God absolutely cares, but not in the way that a gambler does.
Well, and my take is I don't think that Bobby Bowden's faith is what led to the wins and losses. But what I do believe was that his faith influenced a coaching staff that was able to stay together for the better part of 2 decades. And
Right.
I think his faith was what attracted so many great players to come to Florida State to be part of that family. You know, the sad reality, and when you say, why does a coach that doesn't have the same kind of morals, the same kind of faith background, you know, sadly, on Sundays, the churches are full. But you know what? Sometimes the liquor stores and the strip clubs are full too. I mean, free will exists in sports and in life. And so, you know, what I believe is that Coach Bowden's faith was absolutely influential in keeping, you know, the environment together for as long as he did. And so, did God reward us for that? No, but I think that faith and that attractiveness of Coach Bowden's life and what he emulated is what was able to have that success be so consistent for so long. I think that's how I would answer that question.
Those are all really great answers, and it makes sense when you guys are all very obviously faithful guys or have thought about these things, participate in them, teach, preach. Some of you guys I know are involved in that. That's something very similar I always say to people is that I believe God cares about everything. I believe God cares about everything, and I do think He cares about the wins or losses on some level. I don't, you know, how that all factors in. I don't know, but I know the gospel says that not a sparrow falls to the ground without His knowledge. So He even seems to care about birds. So I'm sure He cares about football players and coaches and so on. And I think what's remarkable, what I've experienced just talking to you guys this day, and is the success of the football programs more than wins and losses, but there's some formation that takes place for these players and for these coaches. And the most important thing is what kind of person we are. And we often talk about, we say Bowden's faith, we keep saying his faith, but his faith is, what you guys keep saying is that this was authentic. This wasn't like a sliver or a facet of him that he, you know, put on and took off or used at certain points, but this was who he was. And his faith is synonymous with who Bobby Bowden is. And that's why I think it's important to recognize this, is how, what did this do, this part of his life that was his life, how it transformed him, how it made him the kind of person he was, how that influenced others. I mean, to me, that's where I find this success and very refreshing to talk to you gentlemen. And I want to thank you. We're kind of coming to the end. I want to leave you with, there's one quote that someone submitted here as well. There's somebody who served as his administrative assistant. She said, I was Coach Bowden's administrative assistant from 2000 to 2007. I think we're also fortunate to be touched by Coach Bowden on a daily basis, and it really shaped our lives, Stacy. So I think that, I mean, for me, that's the lesson that I gather from all this, is just how, again, not so much about success in terms of winning or losing, but the success of what did it do for my life, and how did it, many of you shared about how this has affected you as a family man or a business owner. This is more than just football. It's more than just sports. This is something that built character and influenced you for the rest of your lives. And that's the kind of impact I think that Coach Bowden had on all of us that were privileged to kind of know him or be touched by him in some way. Guys, thank you so much for being here and for volunteering your time to share these stories. I'll give you, everybody gets a closing minute. We have enough. And I'm sorry that Commissioner Maddox wasn't able to join us. That's unfortunate, but I'd like to give you guys one final word here before we sign off.
Well, I'd like to say I appreciate you guys for having me on and allowing me to share a few moments about Coach Bowden. He's definitely a living legend and will continue to be in all of our lives, not just because of his football record or acumen, but the man of God that he was and the way he lived his life. And I think that's something that we all can learn from. And that's something I know it helped me when it came to my faith. Going to New York from Thomasville and Tallahassee and being bold and standing in front of all those people when they were trying to discredit my name and their way of doing things, and just rising up, with the power of God living through me, with others encouraging me to stand for what I believed in. That's what Coach Bowden did and taught me and showed me that regardless of what people may say about you, you know what's right and what you believe. And when people try to discredit your name, you know, you have to be humble and, you know, live according to what God has called you to do, and people will see the truth.
Yeah, and I would, I'll let you close it up, Dan. I would just share one anecdote just to say that his influence and his authenticity was not limited to football players. I had a roommate who was involved with a campus ministry and was going overseas to do missions work, and he needed to raise a couple $1,000s. And I encouraged him to write Coach Bowden. He wrote Coach Bowden, and he got a handwritten note back from Coach Bowden, and Coach Bowden paid for his whole trip. Sent him overseas to go do this missions work, and, you know, something along the lines of God bless you, you know, just a sweet thing. But this guy was just a student, and Coach Bowden took the same attentiveness, I think motivated by that same greater love of the Spirit of Christ compels him to just live well. And so I would guarantee you there's lots of people out there that didn't wear the uniform. They could tell you they had similar authentic experiences with Coach Bowden, where they saw his faith lived out and experienced the blessing of a man walking with integrity with the Lord.
Yeah, and I would just finish off by saying that, you know, as I'm getting older and I have a family, and, you know, my wife and I celebrated our 27th date anniversary yesterday. We celebrate that goofy date too, which we love. You know, I just look at the example that Coach Bowden and a lot of good Christian men in my life have set for me, so that to remind me that when the going gets tough, that's actually when you need God the most. And, you know, it's helped me throughout my life so far get through challenges, but also really relish in the joys and the rejoices and the victories. And I think Coach Bowden's example that he was able to live out on a daily basis, you know, not only to his players, but to the community, to his family. I think those, and, you know, sadly, as you go through life, you forget some of these things, but I was so encouraged at his celebration of life service back in August, because it brought all those memories back. I mean, the things that you forgot. And it just really reiterated the spiritual presence that he was able to give so many people over the course of the years that he was at Florida State.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us, and appreciate everybody who joined us online to watch. And I don't know what else to say, so I'm just going to say goodbye and thank you, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.